And I was going to touch on, Luke, as well. You were saying when we started off, you were talking about, the problem that you've got now, based on actually there's been so much sort of purchasing and actually so much momentum in the property market, is that you haven't actually got the stock now. That's what you were saying. You haven't got the properties to sell. Is that the case? Or?
Well, certainly, I mean, as of the end of March, and I think that's probably the fairest barometer when you look back. Because obviously, to say that you've got less properties now or more properties now compared with this time last year, of course, we were closed. But when you look at the sort of post-election Boris bounce, as it were, when we look at that sort of January, February, March period of this year, and compare it to 2019, and indeed go back another year to 2020, and then back another year to 2019. We're seeing stock levels at about 39% lower,
right? Okay.
And buyer inquiries are over 40% higher.
My
so
goodness.
It's very much a seller's market at the moment. But as I said, it changes in terms of in different price ranges and different properties. But as I said, demand for country houses is probably the strongest it's been since pre-credit crunch. Actually, this is the strongest country house market I've ever worked in, and that now includes working in 2007. That's for sure.
And that must have a massive impact on obviously the value of properties, isn't it? Is all the values being increased considerably, or?
It's just quite. I've sort of mentioned to you earlier that it's just quite chaotic. It's a chaotic space. So in some properties that there is competitive bidding, and yes, the price then pushes up. I mean, actually, it's interesting to say I still think the market's price sensitive. Okay. So you've got to remember your buyer is moving from one place to another, and let's say that market might be cooler in the city centre. Well, therefore, they've only got what they're selling in order to purchase in most cases. And so actually, whilst prices have increased, it's not seeing huge percentages. What it really is it's demand. I think at the moment we're just starting to see probably the peak of pricing again right now, because all of a sudden now travel restrictions have been eased and retail is beginning to open, and people can I think that this is the sort of peak of the demand at the moment, and also it's probably the lowest the supply has been.
Right. Okay.
Because you asked about properties coming on the market, and I think one of the reasons why we're quite low on stock is not just for the sheer number that are being sold, but people have had their own sort of handbrake on their own restrictions, if you like, through January and February and during this first lockdown. Because the housing market's been open for essential moves, but there was real caution about inviting people into your house, and
absolutely.
Let's get past the peak of this third lockdown. And I think so now what you're seeing is firstly restrictions ease, but also so people are more comfortable to have agents and viewers in their houses. And also it's that time of year, isn't it? It's post Easter.
Yeah.
And it just, so I think the key thing is that we're just beginning to open up properly at the peak selling season, whereas 12 months ago we were starting to close down at the peak season. So I think we'll see more properties come on, definitely, but we think looking at the year ahead, we don't actually believe that stock levels will truly recover at any time this year.
Really? So if you want to sell your house, then now's a good time. You're never going to find a better time.
I think the key thing is actually, yes, it's a great time to sell, but I suppose you've also got to make sure that you've got to have somewhere to go as well.
Absolutely.
So I think keeping this a sort of a balanced conversation. There is, where is my onward purchase or rental? Because as I said, that's proving a dilemma in some cases.
Absolutely. And Luke, we were just talking earlier, you've been in the property market in Bath, you were saying now, for how many years? Was it 20 years, wasn't it? We were just talking about.
I moved to Bath in September 2003. So it is years. Yeah.
So, you've been, as you said, you were talking about the credit crunch, and I think, exactly that. Juice's 23 years. That's what I'm kind of thinking of. I remember it all so well. Remember, what do you think the future looks like for property now locally? I mean, as you said, you've got this sort of supply and demand. You haven't got the stock. I mean, it's there. It's definitely there. Of course, it's there, but it's just not. You look at those sort of percentages you were giving us then, and you can see, my goodness, there's a real sort of push. What do you think the future looks like for property if you had that ball?
Well, I said, to try and understand what's going to happen in the future, it's always good to look at what's happened in the past, I find. And so what I would say is you just mentioned there the credit crunch, and obviously we had double dip recessions. So if you look back pretty much to September 2007, when the first queues formed outside the Northern Rock, and then you begin to think about the referendums, the elections, the hung parliaments, the credit crunch, the recessions that we've had. Oddly enough, during that period of time, particularly in Bath, the property market has been remarkably stable. And so there have been moments in 2008 when transaction numbers dropped dramatically in the aftermath of the first credit crunch, but they bounced back significantly in 2009. Similarly, 2011, which was that sort of second part of the recession, things were quieter. But what we do know is that this is a place where people love to live. People want to live, aspire to come here. It's great education, it's good countryside. The links into London, although perhaps not as relevant in the last 12 months, they will be again when
absolutely, yeah.
Bristol Airport down the road. I think at the end of the day is that there's a finite number of property, and you've obviously got significant demand. So I think eventually the steam will come out of this particular market because people are moving in part due to their lockdown experience or a reaction to the pandemic. Once people are sorted, they'll be sorted, and we'll return back to a sort of more normal market.
Absolutely.
But a more normal market tends to be a market that is driven by families moving out of London, downsizers selling. So I see no reason as to why the market in Bath and the surrounding countryside, and indeed across the south, will probably remain pretty buoyant for the foreseeable. I think we've got one eye on the other side of the end of the stamp duty holiday.
I was just about to say about that, yeah.
And I think maybe if people are able to go on holiday, even if that's to Devon or Cornwall or Scotland or wherever it might be, I think with people having not really had much of a break for 12 months or so, I think actually, unlike last year, the summer market just carried on and on and on. I think this year you will see people take a sort of break in time.
Yeah, I think that's it. And I think you're so right. I think over the last 12 months, everybody's been in their four walls and they've been at home, and they've actually really invested in their properties, probably more so than ever. And actually, but I do think now there's only sort of so much investment you can do before it, you actually just feel like you just want to get away and you want to have that exposure to something different and something exciting. And I think, as you said as well, we are resilient. We are. You were just going through that, and I was thinking, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that. And we've all been through it. But you're so right. The word you use, bounce back, is absolutely key, and it will do, and we will get back to that sort of slightly. That's something a little bit more normal. And I think it will. But I think we will all learn from this in terms of it did turn the world upside down, inside out. But actually, I think there'll be positives that we come from it in terms of, like you were saying, the flexible working, in terms of the importance of our homes, in terms of importance of the balance of the work and the life, and being with the children all the time and thinking, actually, this has been great. Times a bit challenging, but on the whole.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, in fact, you're talking about the relationship that has, the importance of home has sort of been magnified during this period of time, and it's kind of, the home has become the classroom, it's become the office, it's become the gym, the place that you live, it's all, and so it's amazing how, and people have adapted their homes accordingly, like, as I said, garden sheds have become offices and that sort of thing. So, and actually one of the things that we notice, which is we've done quite a bit of study on sort of buyer criteria, and I have to say, a work from home space is right up there, along with very, very good Wi-Fi. And that's interesting now, people sort of, rather than sort of, talking about necessarily just the south facing garden or the 4 bedrooms or somewhere to park the car, there are those extra elements in people's searches as well, you see. So the relationship with our homes has definitely changed.